Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back Monday. So I took Friday off. I had my somewhat annual, I go every few years, dermatologist appointment. And when you reach a certain age, it's like, oh my God, what are all these spots? There's Yugoslavia, there's Bosnia, there's an emerging Greek state, there's part of Hamas. And, the dermatologist looks at it all and says, no, those are just sunspots. And she's got all these bizarre names for everything. And the word is you're just aging. So, okay, healthy, happy, back at it. A couple minutes late today, and I will blame the dog. I had to drop the dog off at doggy daycare, and then dawdled over the coffee machine, catching up with folks in the morning. Good morning. How are you, Mike?
Dawdled over the coffee machine. I'm hanging in there.
You have never dawdled over a coffee machine? Is that what I'm gathering you're saying?
No, I would never dawdle over a coffee machine.
What would you do with your said coffee machine?
I would kick one. I would kick it.
Kick it. That's the intergenerational difference. When you're on the way up, everything's in patience. It's kick, overpower, coax. When you get to my age, it's come along. Please help me one more day through this interesting business of living. So, Friday was a busy day for Mike and me. We were off the stream while I was getting, my integument checked out, that is skin. And Mike took the morning off. But then went to Laid Back Law. I appeared there briefly and then did an interview with Viva. What was your take on these interviews, Mike?
So I quite enjoyed the rediscovery of Norm Pattis. Many of our viewers know, but many, many more do not know mine and your origin story. And it's not as though it's that crazy, except it was the algorithm, as it were, that put your first ever audio file into my LinkedIn timeline, and by and through a mutual colleague of ours in a series of events, and mostly me begging and pleading for you to take my call. Law and Legitimacy.
I'm not that bad.
But in general, I think that it's easy for those who come to this stream from the perspective of Norm Pattis as the success with the I guess the visibility, not notoriety in some circles, as it were, to believe that it was always this way, or to form some opinion that may reside primarily in the house of privilege, right? Or one that would assume certain facts about you that could not be further from the truth. And so I feel like it's awesome when someone like Viva, who has over on Rumble, over 400,000 subscribers. I'll put that on the screen. It's awesome to me when there's an opportunity for someone like Viva, who obviously shares a reverence and a respect for you as an attorney, whether you know that or not. Obviously shares a great deal of respect with other attorneys that we appear with on Laid Back Law. For one, Norm Pattis to discuss his origin story, his early childhood, his mother, his father, his matriculation through the real world, the School of Hard Knocks, as we call it, and then eventually to the practice of law, which many people don't know that you didn't begin practicing law until the mid-90s, right?
Yeah.
And I think that begs the question of, well, what the hell were you doing before then? And as fate would have it, you were teaching. Where were you teaching?
At a certain institution that shares a name of a city in South Carolina, Columbia. No, the origin story,
Oh, okay. Is that?
I know it makes you uncomfortable when I name drop that, but
it doesn't make me uncomfortable at all. I think that it's just, things come full circle. Columbia's in the news now for the wrong reasons, or maybe the wrong reasons. Who am I to say what reasons are right or wrong? But ultimately, I think that your life and your arc is long and interesting, and it makes you who you are to yourself and to everybody else in your life. So when I get a chance to see someone like Viva for the first time, hear things that I know, there is a certain entertainment value to me personally, because those are all the things that I've known for a while. And many would ask, why we would take this road of starting Law and Legitimacy, bootstrapping it, doing it for free. And it's because you are a mentor and a teacher to me, and I could think of no one better to be in business with, if you want to call it that, to be doing what we're doing. So to me, there's a lot within that, the Alex Jones stuff, the January 6th stuff with Joe Biggs. But I think that most of the stuff that to me is really valuable comes in the first, I would say, 30 to 40 minutes, when he's really probing the basically the biography of Norm Pattis.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that, because I'm not. I was a little surprised. I didn't expect him to go that way. But biography is sort of destiny, and for those of you who aren't going to listen to the whole show, the School of Hard Knocks about sums it up. My parents quit at perfection. I'm an only child. And I was born on the run, as it were. My father was an unlawful immigrant into the United States from Sfakia, Greece, sneaking into Canada over the Windsor Bridge with his father sometime in the 1930s. He became an Oliver Twist type character, or so he told me, who lived by his wits as an armed robber robbing payroll trucks back when cash was king. He had his own crew, as it were. They had their own apartment building. As he put it, you needed a warrant to get above the third floor. They had safe houses where they hid when the heat was on. Now, I didn't know any of this as a kid, because he left the year Kennedy was assassinated. That was a year when I was 7. And I was overcome with the wonder of playing outside in the park and electric trains in our wonderful apartment building in Chicago, an apartment. But we lost all that after he just walked out the door one morning, and never to return. And I didn't see him again until he was in his mid-40s. And by that time, many, 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 many roads had been traveled, and some of them were painful. My mother was intermittently present in my life, and to a large extent, I was required to raise myself in the presence of strangers and their homes who didn't always welcome me. And so I fought to find points of light, places where I was respected and people cared for me. And I'm living proof of Hillary Clinton's line that it takes a village to raise a child. I could go down a list of 9 to 10 families who meant the world to me along the way, places where I could go for a meal, places where I could go to stay if I felt unsafe, doors that were always open, and people that treated me, a stranger, as though I were a family member. And it was that gift of love, I think, that I accepted, maybe ambivalently. Nobody wants to feel that they have to deserve being loved. Unconditional love is best, but that was given to me plenty of times. And so in terms of a career vocation, we lived like, I used to call us urban nomads. My father disappeared one year. My mother and I went to live in a one-room flat with a Murphy bed. I got the bed out of the wall. She got the couch. And we didn't talk much. She was depressed and devastated by having lost all she owned in bankruptcy. But she made sure I had enough to eat. She made sure I got to school. We didn't have a television. I was pining away to learn what others were seeing on TV at the time, and was kind of bitter about it in the way kids can be. And we went from there to live with a relative of hers and a sister. We were in one room, and her 3 boys were in another, and her husband and she were in the 3rd bedroom of a small 3-bedroom ranch. And this was a strict Roman Catholic household. So I went to Roman Catholic Church and observed the rites without necessarily incorporating them into myself. From there, we moved to, the attic of an unheated home on Detroit's east side with a couple from the south. And I had shared the attic. And I can tell you, an attic in Detroit is hot in the summer, cold in the winter. And we went from there to a rooming house to apartments of our own until my mother emergently found herself, or graduated to a place on her own feet with a man who became her lover and ultimately her husband, a cruel Detroit union official and rodbuster, a man of some violence and a perpetual drunk. He and I didn't get along, and frankly, I probably owe such success as I have in life to him, because he made it clear that I was not welcome in my own home. So I went to night school, got out of high school early. A high school guidance counselor found me. I'd never been in one school district long enough to be tracked. She said, you test well. What are your plans? I didn't really have any. I was going to run off to Haight-Ashbury with a woman I met at a summer camp where I was teaching canoeing the summer before. And we were going to settle happily ever after into acid, sex, drug, and rock and roll. And I think the teacher concluded that wasn't much of a future, so she got me the Mothers Club scholarship.
Like picking a coffee maker, you know?
Yeah, true. So she sent me. I got a scholarship to go to a teaching college for a year and a half, where I learned how to study, taught myself how to study, and did well. Ended up at Purdue, graduated, did really well there. Ended up at Columbia with a full ride in the moral and political philosophy program. Did that for about 6 years, taught there for a few, which Mike doesn't like me to talk about.
Why do you say that? What do you mean? I love it when you talk.
You guys tease me about it. And then, graduate, I had a sense of real social insecurity at Columbia. A lot of prep school kids. Funny story. I remember, I had a bunch of kids from New England prep schools in one of the classes I taught with seminar with some kids from the islands, and we were talking about St. Augustine one point, and the prep school kids were sneering because clearly they'd heard it all before. And the kid from the island was suffering. So one day he finally raised his hand, and I said, Jean-Louis, what do you have to say? This reminds me of something I saw in a Spider-Man comic book, he said. And he talked about a transformation in a character in Spider-Man, and the prep school kids about died. And I thought, well, at least he's talking. And, visual representations of the world can obviously merge. And you can find some of what Augustine was saying in Spider-Man, I suppose, if you look hard enough. But I got out of that life. Grim Channel asks why I didn't finish my dissertation. I think it was in part a number of factors. I've been married twice. My first wife had our first child, and the need to support it was overwhelming. I was a good student. I was on the editorial board of an international journal called Political Theory, where I evaluated manuscripts from around the world for publication and would pass them on to the senior editors, which was a who in the world of political theory. I was teaching. I was regarded as on my way up. But the guy whose position that I was arguably being groomed to take had written a fine book on Bernard de Mandeville, and he wasn't given tenure. And he had to find his own way and ended up with tenure at University of Oklahoma at Tulsa, where I believe he had a long career. I wanted some control over that. My dissertation topic was David Hume and the Strategy of Enlightenment. I was a God-obsessed young man and wanted nothing more than to know God, and concluded that I couldn't, or that he was unknowable in any meaningful sense, and wanted to find out how to live a good and satisfying life in a godless universe. Hume taught me that, his treatise on human nature. And in the course of working through the dissertation, I realized I knew where I was going, and that's what I wanted. But I also believed that as a skeptic, there weren't larger truths to teach, and therefore I wasn't prepared to spend a life teaching the general proposition that I don't have larger truths to teach. And so I wanted to know, I was concerned that I was becoming more of a specialist in the 18th century than my own. I applied to the CIA, was a near miss there. I thought that would be interesting. And was going to be an operations officer or spy. And then a newspaper journalist job I became aware of. And I thought, what better than to be paid to read the news and comment on it. So I did that for about 5 years and then gravitated to law school. So it's an unconventional path. And once I got to law school, my first boss, who quickly became my first partner, was a sort of icon on the East Coast, maybe nationally, in police misconduct litigation. And so for 7 or 8 years, he and I tore up the East Coast, went to Second Circuit, United States Supreme Court, had a ball playing with the concept.
His name is?
John R. Williams.
John R. Williams, yeah.
In his late 80s and suffering. I worked happily with him until I decided to create my own firm, which does mostly criminal defense. And so, I remain struggling. I remain confused. I remain at it every day. I see Blue Raptor's got lots to say to me. Thinks I pander to my wife, that I've got Trump derangement syndrome. I'm clearly under Blue Raptor's wing, and thank you for your attention, Raptor. But not my God is intellectualism, and that can lead you astray. There's certainly more to the world than mind. I get it, Raptor. Mind was the tool that gave me a ladder out of despair. And, I've climbed that ladder about as high as it can go. Now I look around for other things, and I appreciate your feedback and poking. So Viva Fry, Viva surprised me. I knew we were going to be interviewed. I knew he was looking forward to the interview. I didn't fully expect so many personal questions, but I tried to answer them honestly, in a long form context that was quite a bit longer than what we've just done here. If you find any interest in the story, there it is.
No, I think it's great, and you've got plenty of people commenting here on Rumble in particular. I just want to pick one out. Bathtub Liquor BTL, good morning, says Norm helped me refocus on some aspects of being a step parent, made me realize how important it is to make a stepchild feel welcome in a new home.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was a step parent to one child, a parent to two. They're all my children now. I don't draw distinctions. But I think with respect to my stepson, I know what it's like to be scorned in your own home, and that's the worst thing you can do to a child. And so my view is if you marry into a family with children, that is a place where you show your love by always taking second place, by always making sure that child has what she or he needs to feel secure. And, you fall in love with their spouse the way men and women fall in love, but you acquire by a slightly different, subtler, and kinder way a love for that child. And if you can express both, you can do the and with heart, with feeling, genuinely, you can do the impossible, and you can merge a family. We've got 3 kids now, and 6 grandkids. The 3 kids regard themselves as siblings. When they check their biographies, they know they weren't all raised all the time in the same household, but the stories they've shared about their raising make that a seamless experience over the passage of time. And my wife and I both know, regardless of what happens to us, because, we're long in the tooth, we have created a family unit that will support one another for the rest of their lives. And, that more than any verdict, more than any accomplishment, is the thing and I'm most proud of. That, and having gotten them out of school without student debt. You are what you give, and your children are, if not an altar, they're a place where you can deliver the bounty that life has given you. And if your children can share it, and can prosper, and can thrive, and can grow, and learn to give and accept love, what more do you want in life?
Lawyer Will asks a question that'll help us transition away. And thank you, Norm, for you were you were probing this morning to see if there was any value in you talking about what you just talked about, and I didn't even answer the question because I thought it was a silly one. But Lawyer Will asks, Norm, I'm doing a deposition today. What are your favorite deposition questions?
I once had a deposition of a man who would become wealthy, and the question became, where did he put his wealth? Was he hiding wealth? And he was enormously sophisticated, smarter than me. He knew money better than I ever will, had more than I'll ever hope to have. And I knew he could outthink me and run circles around me. So I told his lawyers, plan to be in this deposition for a few days. And I just went slow. Tell me about the first job for which you were ever paid. What kind of job? The first task you ever did that you made money at. Well, that was mowing a lawn. Oh, when was that? How long did you mow lawns? And, and then I just went one after another, after another, after another. And I was thorough. And it was always who, what, where, when, who, what, where, when, who, what, where, when. And when I saw an inconsistency, I'd say, several days ago, you said X, now you're saying Y. You would realize that in this world in which we live, both can't be true. Why did you change your testimony? And so I think the why question in a deposition is the most important. A deposition is a discovery enterprise. And what you're trying to learn is as much of the truth as you can get from a deponent about the situation that brings you to court. Everybody's defensive. Nobody wants to give more than they can. And I think that by being patient and asking why, you serve your client. A good friend of mine who was on the stream from time to time, and he and I are frankly starting a murder case today. We're picking a jury together, Jim Nugent. He notes with humor that my use of the question why is common in a criminal case. You can get a witness to the point where whatever answer they give, it doesn't make any sense. And then you can break the cardinal rule of cross-examination and ask why. And so he'll always say that I do it with a sort of snotty tone of voice. Why? Why? and if you can get your goal is to your goal is to let the witness lay their own traps. And every now and then you'll get a witness who's perfectly candid and whose answers don't make sense because sometimes reality doesn't make sense. Sometimes you'll get a witness whose answers don't make sense because they're lying or they're being deceptive or they're undervaluing something. Your objective in a deposition should be to acquire as much information as possible by the use of open-ended questions. Save your pointed, closed-end questions, your direct examination. Save that for trial. But at a deposition, open-ended questions. Be like a child meeting someone for the first time. You're a bus driver. How did you become a bus driver? Why? What do you like most about being a bus driver? Now, this day they say there was an accident. You must have felt horrible. What do you remember just before the accident? Well, how did you feel when you learned that somebody had been hurt? Did you know the person that had been hurt? I'm guessing that perhaps you feel like you failed that person. They got hurt while they were under your responsibility. How do you deal with that? These are sort of human questions that come from the heart, and I think I think those are my favorite deposition questions.
It's a great answer, and Will thanks you and thanks me for asking it, but I know appreciates. He doesn't ask gratuitously, so. Thank you for taking a couple of minutes there. Dawn asks, was Hope Hicks' testimony helpful or harmful to Trump? Seeing mixed opinions. What do you think, Norm?
Well, I think the reason for that, Dawn, is that she gave mixed motive testimony. She gave a little bit of something for everyone. So as I understand the Hicks testimony, it went, and Hope Hicks was a primary aide to the president who helped him manage his image.
He was his communications director from the White House during his
big job for a young woman. Stunning that he chose someone relatively inexperienced to do it, but he did. But her role in the trial, I think, is to help shed light on Trump's motives for authorizing the payments to Stormy Daniels through Michael Cohen. And so from the defense perspective, the defense wants to argue that this was to cover up adverse information on the eve of the 2016 presidential campaign. From the Trump organization's perspective, the claim is it was to prevent familial embarrassment. And as I watch the reporting, nobody seems to ask the following question: why couldn't it be both? And as I think it was. It's often the case, and especially in the madhouse environment of social media, where everybody wants to be first. And, you want followers and you want clickbait and everybody's got to be witty and they've got to be this, that, and the other thing. It's this, it's this, it's this. It's usually a little bit of everything. So my hunch is, whatever you want to say about Trump's marriage, which undoubtedly is unusual by the likes of most of ours, it isn't going to create a happy day when over breakfast he says to, Melania, oh, by the way, I just paid $130 to another porn star to keep her mouth shut about our banging. That just can't be a pleasant conversation. And so I can imagine he wants to avoid that and keep it off the breakfast table. If it comes up, she's probably heard it all before. And who knows that they even share the same breakfast table? I don't know. I mean, there's no accounting for how how man and woman live together under conditions of intimacy, if it's intimacy at all. But I could also imagine that given the access Trump Hollywood bit, and I can grab women by the short hairs and they won't say anything about it. I can imagine people would want to keep that quiet as well. So I think her testimony is a mixed motive testimony, and both sides will argue what they want out of it. Some jurors will conclude that it's all one and not the other. Others, I suspect, will say it could be both. And you know what? On a mixed motive metaphor, or a mixed motive theory, Trump loses because the motive doesn't have to be entirely to bury the information. It just has to be a substantial factor. So I think Hope Hicks hurt Trump far more than she helped him.
Well, I think certainly there's an appetite on the political right to certainly to, I think, brand it a different way. And I say that to say, look at the headline from the New York Sun, which is most typically not favorable to Trump, or at least not super sympathetic to Trump. And the headline is Hope Hicks weeps on the witness stand, denounces Michael Cohen as, quote, not selfless and charitable, a, quote, Mr. Fix-It who, quote, first broke it. And I think that, as it relates to the, some of that testimony, is that you still interpret that as being, I think, more to the benefit of the prosecution here, Norm?
And so I think the prosecution has to prove that the payments were motivated, at least in part, to keep news out of the presidential campaign. And so if that's proven, that's beneficial to them. The defense can say, well, wait, it was also in part to keep it away from his family. That's a good spin for the defense. But so long as any part of the motive was to keep it out of the public domain, I think that's a prosecutorial strike. I think they win on that.
Sure. Okay. Well, and certainly her position as being in communications is I think the reason that her testimony is material to the adjudication of those issues, right? Because every communications strategist has some reason to spin it in a way that is most positive in the public mind, right?
Well, I think that's the goal. I mean, you get a piece of news and, you want to tell the truth, but, you don't want to tell it. You want to tell it in a way that helps rather than hurts. And sometimes the truth is ambiguous,
So you sent me this, and admittedly, I've had only a few minutes to make my way through. I skimmed it, and I'll say at first here that this is a topic that has been simmering sort of slightly beneath the public consciousness, I think, for the last couple of years. I think it became a little more relevant during the January 6th prosecutions in those trials. And one James Lindsay, if you're not familiar with James Lindsay by now, I'm sure that most of our viewers are. James Lindsay first sort of appeared on the public scene by and through the Joe Rogan podcast when he and two of his research colleagues published fake findings to expose sort of the DEI underpinnings of modern academia. He has, for the last I would say for the last 6 or 8 months at least, has been talking about the danger of the current federal regime's focus on branding those that are Christian as white Christian nationalists, and what that means from a national security perspective, and where the sights are being aimed from the federal law enforcement agencies. Norm, if you want to take the lead on talking about this opinion piece, I wanted to introduce it at least that way to give some context.
I'd like to save it for tomorrow, Mike, because I think it's a longer discussion, and I'm looking at some of the comments. And the question presented will be, what is Christian nationalism, and is it a threat to the United States? But I want to look at Freedom Lover's comment, which echoes back to, I guess, some of this stuff about Trump. Norm, you do realize that a lot of stuff said about you is false, so why couldn't you believe that some is false about Trump? It totally amazes me. Freedom Lover, that is true. I don't read a lot of the social media commentary about me, candidly, because it's so painful, and I don't really want to give up my energy or my power, so to speak, to chase phantoms of rage. I do acknowledge that a lot of what gets said about people is driven by ideological narratives and hatred and so forth, and very deep and dark and suspicious about the internet. I think if you're a politician, that is your marketplace. That is where you cast your images. I'm not sure that in the case of the presidential candidates, there's a very good job in the campaigns of distinguishing truth from falsity. I know that Dawn McNeil is going to, Dawn, get your finger on the keyboard about how naive I am about the courts. I still think about the court system and cross-examination as a great engine for determining what the truth is. At least it's more disciplined than the free-for-all of social media. So, I'm open to that, Freedom Lover. It's a great comment. And, I'll stick it in my mind and give it some thought and try to use it as a lens the next time I'm succumbing to what Blue Raptor calls Trump derangement syndrome.
Let's see here. Norm is naive about the courts. I guess it's just funny because you spend the most time in the courts.
I mean, look, I may be naive about the courts, but I've got a case today. A man accused of murder. The defense is self-defense. We'll be at it for about 3 weeks. We've studied the videos. We've interviewed the witnesses. We believe our case. There's no other quorum that's going to permit us to make it than a court. And so I may be naive about the courts, but I don't know a better way to go to adjudicate a serious criminal conflict. If you know one, tell me. It certainly isn't social media. I'm not going to put the video on the air and say, what is he, folks, guilty or not guilty? I'm not going to go on a talk show and make my case and say, what is he, guilty or not guilty? The courtrooms have orderly procedures. They have rules of evidence. The parties have roles. And the trial is a solemn undertaking. Unless you've participated in one, don't be too quick to denigrate it. So,
Upon the Horizon over on Rumble says, big day for Joe Neerman, a.k.a. Good Logic, here on Rumble. Think he defends his lawsuit today to remove Trump's gag order.
Yeah, I hope he gets to argue that. I know he was unclear Friday whether he was going to have to. And Blue Raptor, leave my wife out of this. That's a sort of ad hominem attack that just is beneath you. Norm has
what was the screen name or the username of that one that appears to have, I guess, gone the way of the dinosaur that was always in the chat looking for attention? What was his name? You remember?
I don't. I didn't know who we were talking about.
It seems like maybe the reappearance is not coincidental. Anyway, Norm, off to court today.
Yeah, but let me announce a project for folks. So any day now, the appellate courts in Connecticut will rule on my 6-month suspension incident arising from, I should say, the Alex Jones case. That 6-month suspension, together with the working in a largely uncompensated way for the Proud Boys for 6 months, is going to place my firm and me under some financial stress. So we're looking here at Law and Legitimacy for alternative income streams. I'm willing to travel to address civic groups, obviously, for a fee, or clubs. If you think you find anything of value here, help create a market for what we have to say, and we'll take our message nationwide. Because if I'm wrong about the appellate courts and I lose that opinion, I'll be out of the law for 6 months, and I'm still got plenty to say, and plenty to say about the law rather. If I can't say it as a lawyer, I'll say about it as a speaker. So help us find opportunities to spread our message, and we'll all be happier, right?
Indeed. Junior Coltrane,
yes.
our chat reminds us. So Junior, nice to see that you drive a blue Ford Raptor, allegedly. Anyway, Norm, I am off to get my week started. Feels like Friday was merged with Monday, so I need to get on it. And gentleman here says, I have blackjack strategy that is a guaranteed winner. Well, you can share that with us as well, just not publicly, right? And as long as it's not unlawful, I guess we'll put that disclaimer. I guess he's.
I would prefer to do. I like talking. I like talking to people. I know I'm going now to the Michigan Criminal Defense Lawyers Association to give the keynote address to about 100 criminal defense lawyers who will gather in July to hear, about how to practice criminal law. We've got stories to share, or we're looking for venues to share them. Go to your community, find out whether they'd like to have one of us come out and speak, and then let's talk about what it would take to make that happen.
Sounds good. All right, Norm. And if everybody has realized that the music has changed back to some of the more recent goody stuff, it's because I think part of our issue over on Rumble perhaps is related to copyright, Norm.
That's your baby.
I'm still speculating. We were demonetized on YouTube for using the CP phrase. That's just going to be charitable to YouTube, and in view of our appearance on Laid Back Law, it appears as though that the CP phrase is banned on YouTube. So we've been fully demonetized for that video. The review came back and they said, stick it up our ass on that, Norm. Didn't tell me why. They just told me to keep sticking it up my ass. So we will, I guess, on that one. But over on Rumble, I'm curious. We did have a small surge after you appeared over on Viva. Used different music this morning, and there is notably a larger live stream view count. So we're still figuring stuff out, everybody. And if you haven't noticed, this is all, what you see is what you get. Norm and I come here and we raise this up every single morning. We don't have a staff. We don't have a team. So if you do appreciate what we do, make that known to us. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're liking the videos. Comment, share it around. And if you feel so generous, you can make a contribution on Rumble. You can make one on YouTube. And we'll continue figuring out ways to better receive that stuff as well. But Norm, I'm waiting on that adjudication of your license. I don't think that you're going to be suspended, but I'm an optimist. So anyway, until tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., where we are here every morning, YouTube, Rumble, and X. We'll see you then. See you later, Norm.
AMF, yo-yo.
AMF, yo-yo. Bye, everybody.